Scott, tell us, how should we think about the future?
Thank you. Good morning. So with that introduction, I actually need some water because I literally have been in the desert for 3 weeks. And you can probably hear it in my voice. So, welcome back. Welcome back, and thank you for coming back. This is, as Monique said, now I'm in my 5th year, I think. I just sleep under the seats here in the center, and I come out once a year like a groundhog. Yeah, these are interesting times. These are difficult and trying times around the world, and there's a lot of complexity. There's a lot of chaos. The types of news stories she's talking about are the sorts of things that are really sort of a standard expectation in the morning if you wake up and pick up your smartphone and you open Twitter or Facebook or Snapchat or whatever it's going to be, or still read the newspaper. You'll find these kind of shocking stories. And so, as she rightly pointed out, the future is kind of thrust in our faces. This is something we have to deal with whether we like it or not. But sitting in the background of that is also the way that we think about the future and the types of images we have in our minds and the expectations that we have, and also the decisions that we believe we can make about the future. And so that's what I want to talk to you about a little bit today. As Monique said, I am a managing partner and founder of a group called Changeist. We're now 10 years old, almost. We've been working with organizations for, I go back about 20 plus years, and helping them think about complexity and how do we actually deal with the unusual circumstances that are emerging around the world and help them make decisions. But it's not just to kind of, we don't do predictions, we don't really do forecasts in the way that you think about them. But we help them try to untie the knots and make sense out of a mess, basically. And that often involves really getting out of them how they think and feel about the future and what their sort of mental models are, either as individuals or as organizations. And as you can see from the title slides, they often fall into difficulty in doing that. So I want to talk today a little bit about what I'm kind of stealing a term from user experience design that I'll explain in a minute, but talk to you a little bit about the dark patterns that we encounter in the way that we think about the future and the way that it's presented to us. And then after, this is basically a talk in 2 parts. This is a privilege for us, in that my colleague Madeline Ashby, who you'll hear more about shortly, will be kind of taking that theme and heading in a different direction with it, but kind of hopefully completing the picture for you a bit and leaving you with some thoughts, but also probably some questions for yourself as well. And as Monique said, we've just gotten back yesterday from 3 weeks of teaching in Dubai. Have any of you been there before? A few. So if you haven't, you look at this picture and you think, well, that's nice conceptual art. That this looks like some architect's rendering of Hyperloop station, something that's going to be built in the future. In fact, this is about probably 7 or 8 years old. These are the metro stations in Dubai. And when you're inside them or kind of standing outside of them looking at them, you can't help but wonder, how this feels like you're actually standing in a science fiction film. And a lot of progress. The country is really only, just over about 4 decades old. And in that time, they've gone from being a pearl fishing economy to being essentially the kind of global center of trade. In one person's lifetime, the speed of change and transition has been enormous. So for them, if you're a young Emirati or a young person living in the UAE, in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, you have this kind of feeling that the future is kind of everywhere all the time. Even for us jaded veteran futurists going there, you step off the plane, you take the metro into the city, and you just kind of stand in awe for a few minutes. You can't help it, because the level of ambition and the level of progress that they're trying to make is quite staggering. So they've told themselves a story about the future. They have been told, and they tell themselves a particular story. They've framed the future of Dubai and its place in the world in a particular way, and different cultures do that in different ways. This is the classroom that we've been teaching in. It's the world's first or only 3D printed functional office building. The classroom itself is a kind of sealed, glowing blue blob, I guess. We just tell people with the taxis, just park in front of the marshmallow. That doesn't translate into Dutch, does it? But just park in front of the blob and let us out. We'll be fine. It won't swallow us. But it's, even kind of teaching in that sort of environment gives you the sense that you're actually making the future as you're doing it. And we use the insides of that to kind of look out at the city and imagine different pictures. This is actually one of a student design where they were experimenting with explaining how different kind of sensing systems in a smart Dubai might work for people. And so being able to literally use the daily, pedestrians walking by and put these kind of pictures up to imagine what the future is going to look like in the present. It affords you certain really interesting kind of capabilities and opportunities, and then to tell those stories through things like film so that you can communicate your mental model of the future to other people and engage them in it, not for the purposes of coercing them or making them believe your story, but for the purposes of engaging in debate, to make it open, to make it a sort of an open democratic discussion about where we want to go as a culture. Where do we want to go as a people? Where do we want to go as a society, as an economy? And can we bring everyone on board? And so this idea of opening futures up and opening those mental models up for people to explore themselves in their own time and freedom is, I think, a really critical piece that is increasingly missing from our own lives. It's increasingly something that we're not asked or kind of allowed to do. 5 years ago, I was not here, but actually in Almira at was at the World Trade Center, the facility over there, actually doing a talk that I thought was just going to be another quiet rant about something I called flat pack futures. The term flat pack is something we've gotten from big box retailers like IKEA, where you go and actually just purchase an entire lifestyle off the shelf. Your sofa, your chair, your paintings, your plants, the fabrics, everything, you just buy it in one package, bring it home, and boom, you've got your amazing lifestyle. And often, if you think about the commercials we see from technology companies, and increasingly kind of all consumer brands and some governments, they promise these stories of flat pack futures. They actually are just asking you to, forget the decisions, come along, take all of the Google future or all of the Apple future or all of the Amazon future or whoever it is, and just bring that into your life. Don't worry about the details. We have that sorted out. And funny thing happened that a few people were actually paying attention to the video stream and tweeted this and put it on a couple of websites, and the next thing you know, there's lots and lots of viewers to the video and great excitement, and wow, this is actually an idea that's jumped out of my own head, and other people it seems to resonate with the experience that other people have. And I would have thought in 5 years, maybe we would have made some progress in kind of breaking out of this cardboard box of the way that we think about the future. But as much as we kind of push and pull and try to help people think differently and give them the tools to do that, that's not really the way the world is kind of heading at this point. And actually, the problem is not simply one of, oh, well, I can choose this future today in this box or that future tomorrow. Often the actual act of a choice, the ability to make a decision and select the type of future that you want, is not something that even feels real. It even feels apparent. I'm sure Evgeny talked about this yesterday. It's a theme that he addresses quite eloquently in his columns and in his book. The idea that we sort of trick ourselves into believing that we're making choices, but we sometimes don't have the choices we believe we have, or we're signing on for something that we didn't realize the full implications of. And if you're an American voter these days, you're actually beginning to see more and more of that unfold. The simple vote, that you cast for one candidate or another can have implications far beyond the immediacy of the satisfaction of having your candidate win an election. So there's this phenomenon that a UX designer a few years ago named Henry Brignall coined the term dark patterns. And when he was talking about dark patterns, what he meant was, and we've all had this experience, how many times have you gone onto a website, you've signed up for a service that then kind of asks for your credit card, and you think, well, I'll cancel before 30 days. And you find that you get a charge on your bill in the next month or the month after and the month after. We make a simple decision to get access to a free thing freemium. We're signing up for a social network or a new amazing thing on the web, or some package from our mobile provider, and we find that, surprise, the simple thing that we thought we were doing actually turns into something else. And you ask yourself when you open the bill, or you can't get rid of that spam email, or you can't seem to kind of shake loose the membership in this thing that you didn't realize you had actually signed up for. How do I get rid of this? And that's what he talks about as dark patterns. It's not a new thing with the web. Back in the early days of prehistory, when I was a child, we had 8-track tapes. And 8 tracks were, I'm not going to explain them, but they were essentially, something that there were clubs that you could sign up for in the U.S. My parents were signed up for it. That you would get an ad in the magazine every week, and you would tear it out, and it would say, 13 tapes or records for 1 penny, 1 cent. You would literally tape the penny onto a cardboard card and mail it back in. And for that 1 cent, you got this box that came a few weeks later, just completely loaded with music. I guess it's sort of like signing up for Spotify or some other kind of music account now. But you would get this enormous box of free music and think, this is ridiculous. This is $1,000 worth of albums in this thing. This is fantastic. But what happened was every month you would get another box, and more music would show up, but your credit card or your bank account would get billed, and suddenly you're paying hundreds of dollars over the course of a year for that benefit of free music. And so most of us had the experience of trying to kind of get out of that. How many of you signed up for a gym membership but haven't been lately? Yeah, and these are young people. It doesn't get any better as you get older. We still keep making the same mistakes. We sign up for gym memberships. January comes, you think, oh, I've eaten so much over Christmas. I'm gonna do better. At the beginning of the year, new me. I'm gonna sign up. I'll go. I know I'll go 5 times a week. And several months roll around. You've been a few times, and you just go, whatever. I'll go. Now it's raining. It's cold. My bike has a puncture. I'm not going. And you end up finding that you're paying, hundreds of euros, a year for a gym membership you don't use. There is a word for this. There's always a word for things that work against you. There's a word for this, and it's called negative option marketing. It's the idea that you have to opt out. You have to take an act to extract yourself from what seemed like a simple decision. That you have to kind of call someone, write someone, go to a website, scroll all the way to the bottom of a very long email and look everywhere for the unsubscribe button, but you have to actually take yourself out of this. Companies that do credit scoring are brilliant at this. They build their entire business models around having you get a free look at your credit score, and then you can't extract yourself. This happens with airline pricing. So this has moved from off the web and things like music clubs and gym memberships to the way that we go look for airline tickets. I'm sure everybody has had this experience where you're trying to find the right price. You think you've sorted to the cheapest tickets at the top, and somehow you find that you're not quite there, that you've scrolled all the way down and there's the lower cost somewhere else. We've booked so many tickets for travel recently. I've had this happen over and over again. Or, do you want travel insurance? Yes, no. No, you have to go back and say yes, and you find yourself in this crazy loop, and before you know it, you're flying to Phoenix instead of somewhere else. This has also happened to me. My spouse and colleagues will agree. Or you get things like this. LinkedIn is now full of this kind of thing. Just comment below the line, say yes, and you'll get this free PowerPoint template. Or just sign, please put your email address in here, and then when it says no thanks, I don't want free. That's kind of attempting to manipulate you psychologically and make you feel bad for turning down their free offer. This is one of the worst. It's a kind of dark pattern. Probably everyone here has gotten iTunes at some point, and it quietly updates itself in the background. And unless you have the time to dedicate to an entire law firm to read the terms and conditions, you just click agree. But what you don't realize is that you're gradually, slowly, losing bits of your rights to that music. It actually doesn't belong to you anymore. It sits on Apple's server. They can take it back. Imagine if someone had come to my house and taken all of those 8-track tapes away because they just changed the contract without me knowing it. And this has become such a phenomenon in life that people have actually turned the Apple terms and conditions into a graphic novel. It's that ridiculous. It's become that much a part of our existence that we're signing away, and every kind of agreement that you make, or almost every agreement that you make, you're giving up a gradual bits of your rights, your ability to make a decision about what you want to have happen. And so this is the full story. I guess if you can buy this online and take your time to read it, and maybe it's more interesting this way than actually scrolling through it, whatever it takes to get you to actually pay attention to the legal rights that you're signing out. But we kind of get trapped in this accelerated tunnel of pushing us to accept not just futures that are publicly stated to us, but there are a lot of things kind of hiding in the background. If you buy something like an Amazon Echo, the Alexa, the sort of voice device that that you can sort of wake up with its name and it will tell you the weather or order something for you. There are so many changes subtly being made to that service, for example, and that's just one example, that your voice is going to a server somewhere else. 20 seconds of audio before you woke it up goes to a server somewhere else. Like increasing recordings of your daily life inside your home are actually being shipped off to Amazon and sitting on their servers. And that's probably not something that if they put it in big letters on the website, you would click and say yes to. But it doesn't really kind of stop at that point. And I guess the point I'm trying to make is that we're gradually escalating into bigger systems that that support and maintain our lives. That it's not just the thing that stores my music on my laptop. It's not just the device that helps me shop. It becomes more and more sort of systems that begin to wrap around us in the services that we use and the technology that we use. We think there's something really kind of helpful about it. Oh, this is fantastic, it's convenient. But if you've seen the movie Poltergeist, they tell Carol Ann to walk into the light, right? I'll go towards this fantastic thing, and that's why the psychic's like, no, don't go. Don't go towards the light. And that's kind of the feeling you get now with any interaction with the modern technological world, and yet it's now scaling up to be systems that are much more complex, that control our home. You've seen, as Monique mentioned this morning, the ransomware attack that struck worldwide over the weekend. That's just a taste of the types of things that we will see more of, because it's a test to see how many weaknesses there are in the system. That was simply a probe. It was the first pass to find out which computers are really easy to get to. But if you're writing on a metro system somewhere that's controlled by Windows XP, or if you're standing in an airport or in a home that has automatic locking doors, which I've been in two recently that had internet-connected front doors, when these kinds of attacks happen, you've found yourself thinking, oh, well, I bought this thing, I agreed to this doorknob, but now my doorknob belongs to somebody in Bulgaria and I can't get it back. I can't get into my home because I made this simple decision that's now blossomed into a kind of much more complex world. And so when we think about what we have next, what comes next in our near future, things like self-driving cars. Self-driving cars are have enormous promise for us, but the types of this is 5 years after flat pack futures, and we're still seeing this idea that you can step into a pristine, perfect car that's going to go anywhere you want to go, do anything you want to do. You'll notice that it's a young white guy driving the car. There's no one else in the car with him. And as Madeline pointed out to me last night, there's also no one else on the road. He's the only one there. This is not kind of the world that these complex bits of technology will be deployed into. I promise you, there will be other people on the road. There will be other mental models built into the coding that drives those self-driving cars. The algorithms that are used to make ethical decisions about who to hit in case of an accident are going to be programmed by people that you've never met and may not share the same value system with. So by the act of hitting I agree and turning the car on, which for some of these vehicle manufacturers, putting your key in the ignition and starting the car, or pushing a button or starting it from an app or whatever, is an act of agreement to their terms and conditions. You're agreeing to a far-reaching legal system that they're putting in place. So let's kind of take that idea from marketing and user experience and technology and step it up one more level. And that's to a kind of meta level of the types of futures that we want and that we're offered. I'll talk briefly about 4 what I would call dark patterns in futures. The first one is, we'll call if this, then that. Not the service, some of you may use that online to kind of connect apps, but just talking about, this is actually an old, it's a mathematical statement in a way, it's a kind of coding statement. If this thing happens, then that follows behind it. That's pretty much the way that we're presented with ideas about the future and images of the future. That if this new innovation comes to pass, then everything will be fine. If we have drones, then there will never be a problem. We'll always be able to spot crime or deliver medicine or whatever it's going to be. It makes a very kind of narrow, flat picture of the world. And self-driving cars are sort of an interesting example of that. That right now, if you're paying attention and sort of tracking this issue, we're doing work with a couple different organizations trying to understand the impact of self-driving cars on cities. Every company that creates them or sort of enables them or delivers them onto the streets has particular ethics systems and particular ways that they've designed their infrastructure. And as you've seen lately in the news, Uber doesn't have the best reputation. They've been caught doing things like hiding or misdirecting people in terms of where cars are in the city so that regulators won't come find them. Making sure that certain people can't use the app or kind of things that in the background are really sneaky and actually quite unethical dark patterns that protect their business and enable them to maximize their profits and deliver you a convenient service, etc. But what happens when they actually control not just the car that's coming to pick you up, but all of the cars on the street? Who's controlling that decision? So if we have self-driving cars from Uber, we'll have less traffic. We'll have fewer accidents. These are the promises we get. We'll have longer lifespans. We'll have all of these wonderful things, and then cities will be utopias because we now have super efficient technology moving around and making everything work fine. Except there are dozens of different companies with competing visions and competing underlying motivations about what they want out of those self-driving cars, and so that doesn't make the city any less complex. It just introduces a new set of questions and a new set of issues, except you're probably not well informed enough as an average person to even know what those arguments and decisions are. So the idea that if this thing happens, then the future will be brighter is this kind of obfuscation of all of the other possible pathways that are out there. Do you want what comes next? Do you know what comes next? Are you well informed enough about what could be the promise of this technology to make a good decision about it? And are you even kind of aware, this is a tool that futurists use called the futures cone. Are you even aware of all the possibilities and the sort of full array of different branching futures that are out there? And can you take the time, and can you spare the time to find out enough to understand what the implications of your choices may be? The second one I would call Tina. It's not a name. Stop laughing. This is actually a phrase that was popularized by Margaret Thatcher, the British Prime Minister, in the late 70s and early 80s. And it was the idea that there is no alternative, T-I-N-A, there is no alternative, that we have no other choice but to go this direction. And she used that term basically to say that there is no alternative to capitalism, that it's the only way out. All of the systems have failed. Follow me. I alone, our system alone, can solve this. We will be the sort of ones that deliver utopia to you. And these ideas that there are these kind of magical laws to the universe that take us in a straight line represent this idea of there's no alternative. Moore's law is an interesting example of this. Moore's law. It's not a law. It's not a physical law of the universe. It's an observation about the capacity of production of semiconductors and the fact that you could get twice the power, in increments over time, so that the entire computing industry for 40 years had been following what was an observation of several data points by Gordon Moore, looking backwards a few years. He made an extrapolation and said, I believe that semiconductors will evolve over this pathway. All of the development of the technology we probably have in this room right now has been shaped by people's belief in Moore's observation, which was there's no alternative but there to be growth at this rate for the foreseeable future. And now the GDPs of small countries are being spent, or the equivalent of the GDP of small countries, are being spent by the big technology companies to continue to stay on that development path. We've never really gotten to fully explore the alternatives to that path of development. Likewise, the singularity. The singularity is a favorite topic of some futurists, that we are developing on this pathway that ultimately, if you follow the kind of logarithmic scale, we will get, from the emergence of life thousands or hundreds of thousands of millions of years ago to the convergence of people and computers, so that hyper-intelligent AI kind of takes over from us, and that we become one with the machine. This is an idea that many people put their faith in. It's an article of faith. It's an ideological belief more than a technological observation. It does have some historical precedent, but at the same time, it's asking you to kind of set aside a lot of the other complexities that are involved in the following this line and just say, stay on the path. And if we stay on the path, we will get to this utopia. There's a third one that I call dark pools, and this is something that actually came out of the finance world. And that's the idea that there are futures that are out there, but we're not shown what they are. They're hidden from us. That they are, not that we don't see alternatives, but entire kind of possibilities are set aside. We may never actually get to find out whether that's something that would work for us. Universal basic income, which has been tested in Utrecht and other places in the Netherlands and is being piloted in other parts of the world, is an interesting example of this. The idea that if everyone had a basic income, whether they're working or not, we would perhaps solve some of the, or begin to deal with some of the inequality issues that we have, because people won't be struggling to make an income and have to make choices they wouldn't otherwise make in terms of their employment, their health, etc. We're now beginning to get the early ideas of what that may work like, but in places like the United States, where I've spent a majority of my life, that's probably not a topic that's going to make it to national level. Likewise, if you're an American, you'll never find out what it means to have healthcare for everyone. It's not a future that's actually being politically offered to people. We don't get to know what it's like to have everyone have the ability to visit a hospital or go to a doctor without the worry of financial ruin. That's a future that's actually been kind of taken and set aside and not even really shown in its full detail. And this is kind of leading up to this particular pattern is something that is kind of deeply connected to the theme of Media Future Week this week. And that's the idea of an alternative present. That they're not just the present that we all agree is actually sitting here right now, the facts as we see them, that the climate is changing, that these things are happening, that people actually said these words on television. We increasingly have people representing to us an alternative present. No, that's actually not what happened. Your eyes deceive you, your ears are lying, that this person didn't actually say that, even though we have a recording right here of this person saying that they never promised you this particular program or change politically. That there is no warming of the climate, that the sea levels are not rising. And it's effectively taking the thing that we just a few years ago kind of accepted as being true and swapping it out for something else and kind of leaving it there, and then making decisions based on that. Little did we know when we signed up for this fun thing, Facebook, to connect you and your friends and your family and get you information about the world, that the subtle shifts in the news feed and how the kind of underlying formulas that deliver information over Facebook over time would take what seemed like objective reality, or even just the projection of our own friends and social networks reality, and slowly modify that and camouflage that to represent a reality that isn't actually lining up with what's physically observable in the world around us, but it's populated with news stories, with comments, with clicks, with other things that are kind of embedded in that full environment, that most of which may not even be real or true. But that becomes, because most of us, a majority of people around the developed world get their news from places like Facebook. We don't see the subtle kind of swapping out of an objective reality for this kind of alternative present. And that has no small implications. It's in part how we end up here. This is a protest this last weekend in Charlottesville, Virginia, where a group of white nationalists came out to Confederate statues and held a torchlight vigil to to proclaim their solidarity with Russia. Like, what kind of nonsense is that? It's the kind of thing that if I stood here 4 years ago or 3 years ago and said to you, it would have been, that's science fiction. That's, speculative social whatever, get out of here. But these are the kinds of things that are happening every day, the types of things that are being openly espoused, promised, manifested, acted on, and political decisions following them. Now, is Facebook totally to blame for this? No. But a lot of small decisions and a lot of small design decisions and marketing and communication decisions that seem small and easy and innocent at the time that may feel like it has nothing at all to do with things like the reemergence of fascism, the rise of white nationalism, or any of these incredibly cancerous, destructive elements in society, the many, many, many small parts and small acts and small acts of indecision and all of these little dark patterns do help to take us to this place. And it means that we need to kind of step back and think about, particularly those of us who are working in technology and design and media and communications, what role do we play in doing in enabling this kind of near future? What role do we play in taking away people's agency, to take away their own sort of free will and ability to make decisions, and the free flow of information that gives them an objective knowledge of the world around them? Because as we see on the kind of the landscape in front of us right now, they do have implications. There are responses and reactions. We do find ourselves in this weird place, not by accident, but in some small way, we've all kind of played a part in it. And we have to actually be able to step back and find out what we can do to redirect. And that comes not just through massive social protest or a vote here or a vote there. It also comes from very small acts of creation. It comes from the intent that you have when you sit down, stand up, wherever you're doing, to make a thing. You need to, at least for now, be able to kind of check and ask yourself, what kind of future am I enabling when I do that? Thank you.